talk to it. Yeah, I can
Okay.
talk to it, yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Thanks.
Good, Will.
Ron, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
You had the volume turned down so they won't hear it.
I just did that. Hi, Senator Buchanan,
Good to see you.
good to see you too.
Let me know when it's 4 o'clock.
It's 4 o'clock.
Okay. So we've got a City Council Public Safety Committee meeting scheduled for 4 o'clock, and it is now 4 o'clock, so you can begin your meeting. We don't really have a chair of this committee, so I don't know if anybody wants to preside over the meeting, or...
I'll chair. You guys ready?
Go for it. Just sit in whatever chair you want to at.
Right.
Call the meeting to order.
Thank you.
Moving right along.
All right, excellent, excellent. So there's one item for your consideration today, and that is consider some changes to the speed limit and on-street parking in various locations within the Eagle Park neighborhood. I'm sure you're all familiar with Eagle Park off of Eagle Road. We have two members from the Eagle Park Homeowners Association board. We have Danielle Van Heerden and Leland Jackson. And they have, as the HOA, they have taken a lot of time this year to really delve into the details of on-street parking within the neighborhood, speed within the neighborhood, and just some general traffic concerns within the neighborhood. As you know, it's not just a neighborhood, but it also has Belmont Central Elementary School as a neighbor, and they share some of the same streets. So there's some school-related traffic issues and some general neighborhood traffic issues. In your packet, you'll see the proposal that the HOA board submitted to the staff for consideration. The staff did meet and concurred with most, if not all, of the recommendations, particularly on the speeding or the speed limit, as well as the on-street parking limitations. When Eagle Park was first developed, and they were the developer was asking the city to take over streets, we wanted to make sure that the developer chose which side of the street to have on-street parking. Because I think initially, before it was populated, people just sort of parked wherever they wanted to on the streets. But as the development became more successful, we had more houses on there, more cars parking on the street. The streets are narrow in there, and so if you have they're not designed for parking on both sides. So the city wanted the developer to pick which side of the street to allow on-street parking and which side to prohibit on-street parking, and to get input from the neighborhood. And so as the HOA board has taken over control of the neighborhood, we did the same thing with the HOA board. So it's not the city making the decision as to where to park, but it was the HOA with input from the neighborhood. So the proposal is in here. I will note, and I'll show you on the screen here, it's a little bit confusing as to what the actual speed limit is. If you look at, so in the traffic study that the police department did, as well as the proposal that the neighborhood submitted, it lists the speed limit as 35 miles an hour. And one of the issues is that there are no speed limit signs posted anywhere in the neighborhood. So we need to have an official speed limit sign posted in order for the police department to enforce. But section 71-01 of our City Code of Ordinances, if you look at the final sentence in that first paragraph, the speed limit on state highways and residential sections shall be 35 miles an hour, and then 25 miles an hour on all other streets. So for residential streets, residential neighborhoods, the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. Just as a point of clarification, it's 25 miles an hour, not 35, but you'll see, and Sergeant Buchanan can go into the details of the traffic study later. Fortunately, during the traffic study, nobody was doing 35 miles an hour, which would be difficult to do within the neighborhood. But the request is to reduce the speed limit to either 25 or even down to 20. But the speed limit is 25.
But there's no sign.
But there's no sign, so we can't enforce it. Correct.
We're not going to enforce it anyhow.
Well,
Just being honest. Do you see a police officer going down there and parole every day?
Not every day, no, but it would be in a response as part of a progressive campaign, yeah. So just to clarify what the speed limit actually is, and then Danielle, if you want to talk about the proposal, I've got it. Just that's the overall map.
Yeah.
Why didn't we put signs in there to begin with, Adrian?
I don't know.
Yeah, David?
During the development stage, we require all developers, the terminology we use called dressing out. It's up to the developers to dress out the neighborhood with street signage, speed limit signage, children at play, whatever. And I don't know at the time why they did not finish. They did everything else but the speed limit sign.
So would we pay for it now, the city?
Well,
The
if
HOA.
if the city puts up the 25-mile-per-hour speed sign, or the 20, yes, we would.
We would pay for it.
But Eagle Park's not gonna want our signs, they're gonna want those kind of looking signs, right?
We have to do enough, you have to do enough signage, like a certain amount of spacing in order for it to be legally enforceable, and then we would supplement with our own signage.
So ordinarily, would the signage be addressed before the city accepts the streets?
Yep.
Yes.
And that just didn't happen
It did
in
not
this
happen.
case?
Everything, all the street signs the street signs in question are decorative, so the city does not do that. We don't do
Okay.
decorative, so it's DOT standard issue. So the street signage that was put in were decorative, the no parking from here to corner were decorative, no parking this side of the street were decorative, but the speed limit signage just...
Are there decorative speed limit signs?
Yes,
Okay.
there are some available, but I think the PD can answer that, whether or not they would be.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
For the sign to be enforceable by us, it has to be duly erected, which it has to be the state standard sign with the writing on the back of when it was erected.
Got it.
It's called duly
All right,
erected.
so there's signs there, they just can't be enforced because the fancy sign's not DOT sign.
There's no speed
How many
limit sign.
No,
Scroll down.
but
Perfect.
decorative,
Talk about that here in a little
There's
bit.
no speed limit signs at all.
I'm confused then.
Okay.
Are there decorative speed limit signs there?
No.
There are no
Okay.
speed limit signs.
So, I'll go through, what signage is actually present in the neighborhood as well as what we're looking to have put in. So the majority of the signage that we're asked and the issues that we're having are because there is no signage. So, we'll just start here. You guys, I just did a brief background, for the summary. We're having parking issues and speeding issues because our neighborhood has grown drastically and we're fully built out now. I think there's one lot still empty and vacant that the builder is building out currently. So we are fully built out. We have a lot of people in a very small area. There's over 300 families or homes live there. So we're getting busy. Thanks for correcting me. It's not 35, but it's 25. But these streets are very narrow. So what's happening is we have on-street parking when it's really actually too narrow for even on-street parking. So it goes down to single lanes. So there's not enough room for people to pass. You have to wait. So it is literally one lane of traffic. And as we know, huge amount of children in that neighborhood. We're right next to the elementary school as well. So speed is a very big concern for our neighbors. And I'm going to ask Homer to talk about some of this stuff as well. But because it's a single flow of traffic, that even greatly reduces the need for slower speed limits as well. And so, proposed solution, we were a maximum speed limit of 20. Like, we would be thrilled with even 15, our residents are saying, but a minimum of, or maximum of 20 miles per hour. And Sergeant Buchanan backed me up on that. They did a speed study and said, yeah, this shouldn't be more than 20 miles per hour throughout this neighborhood. So that's what we're looking at there. So the single-sided parking, so I put this picture up so you guys can really see how narrow the streets are. And it's not such a big, well, it is a big deal actually, because the cars, they're parking enough so that cars can weave through, but when we've had EMS issues in the neighborhood, we can't get the EMS vehicles through because sometimes they park so close that they can't make the turns around the cars. So as you can see, streets in Eagle Park were designed with single-sided parking in mind. They're extremely narrow, And we need signage to reflect this. And the only portions that we have signage to reflect which side of the street to park on are on the upper portions of Assembly. So, and some of the upper portions of Lexington as well. So we need signage that says, hey, no parking on this side of the street, so that we're having continuous parking so that EMS can get through as well as residents.
And you've decided what side you want?
Yes, that's marked.
Who made that decision?
It was based on common parking practices, so not everybody, like visitors don't park how most of the residents do, but most of the residents, after doing it for a certain portion of time, you go, okay, you know what, everybody's parking on this side, so we'll all park on this side. So we looked at what the neighborhood's common practice is and went with that.
Okay.
So would the effect then to basically make a bunch of these streets one-way, since you'd have cars?
No, not one way, just having the parking only on one side. Because right now, as you can see, people are parking on both sides of the streets, but they're so narrow that it really is hard to utilize getting the traffic through if you're parked on both sides. So we just have parking on the one side, and everybody through the neighborhood is used to it, so we're just aware. We pull in and wait while the other person goes through, things like that. So we can navigate that, but we just have to have continuity throughout the neighborhood of which side of the street to park on. Parking in the intersections, because it's such a tight neighborhood, people are parking so close to the intersection that people are having a hard time with visibility at the four-way stops. So we've had many issues with people parking within that 25-foot intersection. So we need to have the streets marked with that. Now, that would have to be something that you guys would have to do now there's not a lot of intersections actually. I think there's 2 four-way stops and then an intersection at Bountiful. Oh, I guess there is a number of them, but yeah.
More than you may think.
Yeah, more than I may think. We can look at that when we get down to the map, but we need to have signage saying don't park from here to the intersection so that people aren't parking there and they can actually enforce it. So. Parking in the intersections, and as far as, we want proper signage installed so that, no parking here to intersection for all of our intersections again, so that they can just actually enforce it. And their recommendation is none, it's already a law, but we just have no way of enforcing it right now. Only park in the recessed areas on narrowed streets. So this has been a big problem for our school bus driver, and he has let us know many times and written, asked us to talk to this point. This, as you can see, it was designed so that, hey, you guys, we've made these cutouts for residents to park on the intersection there, but people are parking along where it's not meant to have parking, because, well, nobody's ever told them not to, and it's just become a habit. But we're having problems with bus accessibility, and because the buses are having issues, we can assume that the EMS vehicles and fire trucks would also have problems with this as well. And so all of these intersections where there's cutouts, people have been parking here, which is also too close to the intersection as well as not designed to park there. So again, we would like parking to only occur in the spots where there is recessed parking spots in the street. This was the way it was designed. Again, just the developer didn't have this implemented before he left. So it's by design, it just hasn't ever been followed through on. This is no parking in the Y at the end of Bountiful Street. The lower portion of the Y is extremely narrow, so you can see how, so we've had residents write us letters saying, hey, I can't actually drive through the end of Bountiful. They've had to reverse back up because we've talked about how narrow the street is, so they've had to reverse back up the entirety of Bountiful in order to get out, because we've had people parked in both this section and this section, and you cannot get certain vehicles. If you have a little tiny Camry, I'm sure you could get through, but if you have a minivan or a truck or something like that, you cannot actually access the lower end of the street if somebody's on-street parking there. And again, by design, it wasn't meant to have any parking there, so this is just following what the builder intended for it, but failed to have it implemented. So what we would like is prohibit parking anywhere in the Y at the end of Bountiful. There's a parking lot directly across the street right here, so there's very close parking accessibility for those residents there. So, and again, Belmont Police Department said, yeah, you really shouldn't have anybody parking there. Okay, no parking on the inside of the curves. There's a couple sharp curves in Eagle Park, so right here and right here on Assembly, and then also down here on Bountiful. But if Bountiful will be taken care of because we shouldn't have anybody parking in the Y there regardless. And then up here, so it's a visibility issue. So the best way to describe it, so right here. So imagine that there's a street here and I'm a car or a tree. You cannot see the road behind me if I'm in the inside of the curve. But if I'm on the outside of the curve and the street is here, you have greater visibility. So you can see the cars that need to go through and things like that. But if you park on the inside of the curve, you're greatly restricting the visibility.
And that's very close proximity to Central. You can see the Central parking lot, Central School parking lot to the right, upper right-hand corner there.
So this is the one on Assembly that's right next to the elementary school, and that's a big concern because there's a lot of kids that are walking into the neighborhood there and without that kind of visibility because there's a four-way stop here. So people are coming and turning here and coming down, but they're not seeing any of the cars that are coming the opposite direction. Again, keep in mind this is a one-way flow of traffic because the streets are so narrow. So that's the reason that we would like outside of curve parking. The common practice right now for this area only is on the inside curve because there's driveways and streets on the outside curve. So common practice right here is on the inside curve, and but that's the only area that we've said, hey guys, this doesn't work in terms of safety. So right there, and again, we're saying because we are such a tight, compact neighborhood, we would like to just have it on the outside of the curve, but I know the Belmont Police Department had a different idea for what they would like done on there. Do you want to talk about that, Sergeant Buchanan?
Sure. Yeah, so, and we talked about it with the city group that we got together, but even parking cars on the outside of the curve, because it's such a sharp curve, cars are going in oncoming traffic, and you can't see regardless. So our suggestion was no parking in the entirety of the curve, both sides.
On Assembly Street.
On Assembly, yes, I think we had talked about that.
Only on Assembly. The other ones are so, they're more gradual. Yeah, there's a lot because you have the yard offset.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the only thing, and we're trying to maintain some of the parking for our residents, so we're asking that we still maintain the outside of the curb, but safety-wise, the police department would like to do both sides. Okay, so this, we would, school side, no parking on the school side of Assembly. Current practice right now is that they don't have any parking that side, so again, we need to have single side parking in all of Eagle Park, so we would like to have no parking on the school side and allow parking in front of the resident's home. And I know the Belmont Police Department had a different idea for what they wanted to do regarding the school, so.
Yeah, so, and we had again had talked about it, but no parking on the school side, so adjacent to the parking lot there. Across the street, do a time restricted parking, so during school hours, you wouldn't park on that side of the street either, and that still allows two-way traffic.
But you can park there at 5 o'clock, 6
Yeah,
o'clock.
sure. So as long as school's not in, you're good to park over there, but during school hours, because if you go down there during school hours, especially when school's beginning and ending, parents are picking up, if somebody's parked there, it really creates a mess. Safety guys trying to get cars in and out through there because it is so tight.
The curve that you guys are talking about on Assembly, are there houses on both sides of that?
There are.
So you'd end up with no parking in front of your house if we do both sides, is that right?
That's right.
That's a concern because I don't see it realistic to do that part of it, although I'd like to from the safety standpoint.
That was
Yeah.
Eagle Park's stance as well as the HOA. We have to look out for our residents as well
Yeah.
concerning parking. And if we took away, it does, because as I said, it's hard to see on the map. So this side, on the inside of the curve where people are parking now, which it is a safety issue. There's no driveways or anything like that. It's just the fronts of the home. So you can have continuous parking along that entire strip. Now, if we flip it to the outside of the curve, there's driveways, there's a street, you're offset from the intersection. So there's really only, we mapped it out 4 parking spots that are available there. Even if we say, hey, no parking on the inside of the curve, it only allows for size-wise 4 parking spots on the outside of the curve. So it would give them something though, and we've talked with the residents there and their understanding of that issue as well. And that's the reason why parking during school hours, I understand that it makes it more feasible, but some of these parking driveways in Eagle Park are only 4 feet long. So you have garage parking or you have street parking but no driveway parking. And so it makes it difficult when you have, let's say my parents came to visit and, they're staying for the week and they're not going to work every day during school hours. It takes away their availability to park in front of my home. So that's the only thing I would urge you guys to consider is the availability for parking and for those residents.
Is there public parking at Eagle Park? Is there like a
Not on
parking
that.
lot?
So there are parking lots throughout Eagle Park, nothing close to up at the top of Assembly,
Other than the school.
other than the school. But you're not going to want visitors parking in the school parking lot during school hours either. So, but that's what we have going on at the top of Assembly.
One of the problems is there's a shortage of parking. The developer didn't build one of the parking lots they were supposed to. We're getting ready to build it ourselves to increase some of the parking on the back side of that
I can,
area there.
yeah, I can go down to
Just
that.
sidebar, how the developer miss out on so much? What happened? I wasn't around for this.
Don't know.
Adrian, do you know?
So I don't know the background on the parking lot because that's not a city issue and a city requirement.
Okay.
This is the parking lot he's talking about right here.
How many developers were involved in that development? Adrian, about
Yeah.
4, wasn't there?
So there were 2 main development groups. One that started at pre-recession and then when it went into foreclosure during the recession, and a different developer bought it afterward and saw it, I think, to completion. But
That's part of the problem, is everything is kind of disjointed. It wasn't, it was approved as a conditional district from the get-go, right?
it was a master plan. It was not conditional.
Okay.
Is my right?
But then the master plan got interrupted by the recession. Then another person took over. If you look at the houses, there's not consistency between the older builder and the newer builder. So, that's why these things were kind of disjointed.
So do we have a process in place to catch this from happening again, or is that something we need to look at?
If it were a conditional district and the city required parking lots, for instance, then that was something we could hold them to. We require a certain number of parking spaces, but we give you credit for garages because garages are intended to be parking for vehicles. Now,
Right.
we don't have the authority to make you park in your garage. So, by default, but there are people that park in their garage. Now, there are some garages that are smaller than the vehicles, and not everybody, when you're excited about a house, you're not always thinking
Logistics.
and,
And you don't expect your children to grow up to be teenagers.
Right,
and have a car.
yeah, you get-
That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Eagle Park is all young families right now.
in about 5 or 10 years, it's
We're
going to be
gonna
a
have
hot
some-
mess with
Yeah.
teenagers.
It is going to be interesting.
Yes. But yeah, so if you have a vehicle that's larger than your garage, if you don't try it out when you're looking at the house, then you're sort of stuck with an unusable garage. So the neighborhood design meets all the parking requirements. It's just where people choose to park, and obviously people want to park in front of their house.
Right.
So full disclosure, I live in this neighborhood. I live on a street that has those bulb out parking spaces on the street. And it's great when you can park in front of your house. That's not always the case. You know, if my neighbors have people over, then I've got to park up the street and walk a block, and it's not the end of the world. But for when you're coming home with kids and little babies and car seats and groceries, you want to park as close as you can. So that's a long way of answering your question, that it does meet all the requirements. It's just there were some extra things that aren't city requirements that the developer said they would do, but didn't. And that's
So
not a
who do they
city.
say they do that for? The people buying homes?
People buying homes.
So they're just saying, hey, we're gonna do this, this, and this, get excited.
Yeah.
And
It
then
wasn't
they just
anything
don't
like
do it.
legally enforceable.
Doesn't sound like it.
The city made concessions, correct me if I'm wrong.
Right, during the recession.
To get.
I'm sure, yeah.
To get the rest of the Eagle Park built out. If you look, if there's drains in the middle of the yard, in places that should have curb and gutter that were never put there. If you go down Eagle Road before you get to the railroad tracks, there should be curb and gutter all the way down to the city limits. But there's culverts sitting in the middle of a grass area with no curb at all. But that was concessions the city made in order to get to get the developer back in step, built out the development.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
It was a weird time.
Yeah, this was, we don't really have another neighborhood like this in Belmont, and I'll argue that there's not another neighborhood like this. But, so this is new for Belmont. This was approved, started in 2005, so, you know, right at the peak of the recession, housing market. And I was one of the first ones in there, and so I got to watch housing values plummet, and, you know, weeds and.
That's what everybody wants now.
Yes,
Their home values to
exactly.
plummet.
Yes. So, you know, it was a tough time, and I mean, there was nothing going on for several years out here. And then a new developer bought it, kept the vision, and built it out. And it's not exactly how it was originally envisioned, but it's close.
Yeah, they did a beautiful job, though. It's a very nice neighborhood, and we like it, but there were things definitely dropped by the developer, like parking lots that just never came to fruition, and we sat there in our HOA meeting and said, do we sue the developer? And our lawyer said, you can spend $10,000 taking this to litigation, and you might win, but the developer just kicked us around like $4,500 in cash.
$10,000 building a parking lot.
Yeah, so the parking lot cost $10,000, so we can either hedge our win, and he settled with us and gave us $4,500 to put towards that.
So when are you guys
but-
building that?
The parking lot, so that was
It's going to be in our
2020, yeah. We wanted to get it done this last year, and contractors aren't always the most reliable humans on the planet, so that was all set, ready to go, and then, boom, they said, actually, we don't want to do this. So we had to start.
Parking in that small part of the neighborhood.
Yeah, what was that?
That's only to solve parking in that.
Oh,
we
yes.
can't even
So
solve it in that.
here's what I was so this is the area that we're talking about. If we take away this parking from the residents for the school, this area, there isn't a parking lot in our area until back here. So that doesn't solve anything for these residents up here.
That's the parking lot that was not built.
Yeah, this is the parking lot that's not built. In terms of parking lots that are in the neighborhood, there's a lot more down here in the dog park. There's a parking lot here. There's a little 3-car parking lot right here. Courtney Lane has no street parking, so they have a parking lot right here. But again, they have no street parking at all. And then
So where's the new one going?
at the pool
Oh,
right up
okay.
here. Yeah, that'll be going right here.
Okay.
But
So go back up to the curve. That's kind of the crutch of this discussion, it seems like. So the police department's saying there's a safety issue going around the curve. And you're saying there's a safety issue, but the convenience is more important?
No, we're saying, so common practice right now is to park on the inside of the curve, and we're all saying, this is not okay. We
Okay.
cannot park on the inside of the curve. Now, the residents that live there are going, what you gonna do about it? So we have to get signage to say, you cannot park here, it's not safe, it's not good, you have to park on the outside. Now, we're asking that they're allowed to park on the outside of the curb because of all the different small things. It actually isn't that many on-street parking spots, but it is something. And we've had, I've met with the neighbors up there and we've walked through it, and they've acquiesced that, yeah, this isn't safe. But they are worried that we're gonna take away all of their.
At Hadrian's Point, everybody wants to park in front of their house.
Yeah,
And there's no way you can do that in that neighborhood.
yeah.
That's probably the basis of the biggest issue probably.
Hey, it's the only neighborhood like that. Everybody over there likes living next door to everybody. Everybody likes the narrow road so you can wave from your front. Like, that was the lifestyle y'all chose. I get it. It's a beautiful neighborhood, but you're not gonna be able to park in front of your, it's just, there's an inconvenience to living in those neighborhoods. And it means you have to grab your groceries and walk through somebody else's driveway up around just like a condo development or, I mean, anybody who's lived in any other, that's what you thought. It's cool, it's just not convenient,
People
so.
get very,
That's too bad.
people get very protective of the spot in front.
I'm sure they do. I'd put a count out there if it were me.
For the record, is in a public street.
Yeah, it's a public street. We're explaining that to our residents all the time, that we cannot reserve.
So you have every right to park there and walk to your house.
I do.
A different neighborhood.
Well, we went over this online, too.
Yeah, exactly.
So is there neighborhood support? Are you done with your presentation?
Oh, yes, so that was another thing. Yes, there's neighborhood support. So we did a change.org. We got over, I want to say we got 200 signatures of residents saying, yeah, we need these changes to happen in our neighborhood. And that's just from our Facebook group where we have 220 members. So as you can see, having most of the people sign this and say, yeah, this needs to happen for our neighborhood.
You guys have any questions for her?
I just had a question about the parking by the school.
Yes.
Is the idea there to prohibit parking on both sides of that street?
So I'm asking as Eagle Park that we allow parking in front of the homes on the opposite side of the street from the school.
Right.
Now, I'm saying no parking in front of this, on the school side.
Right.
Because the way that traffic flows and the way that they utilize it, it's not. But in terms of the majority of the time, people are at work a lot of the time, but let's say that off chance, you have grandma and grandpa visiting and they're staying at the house the whole time. That gives them a space to park because some of these homes that back up there, like, again, they do not have a driveway. They have a 4-foot driveway. That is not large enough to accommodate a vehicle. So in order.
Yeah, that's what I was just trying to figure out where they would park if they couldn't park in front of their house.
Well, they can't park in the school parking lot because they would
Right.
have, so.
Oh, they're rear-loaded garages in those houses.
Yeah.
They could park
Yeah,
in
they
the
have a
garage.
garage, but if you have
Okay.
but if you have a visitor, then it makes
It
it
becomes an
tricky.
inconvenience because the person that's parked in front, if they need to get out, you've got to back out that other person because they're single-lane driveways.
Oh,
They're just like a small drive.
okay.
Yeah, so they have the parking,
And,
they do have the parking.
oh, they do have the parking, but not guest parking.
So they're shared driveways, is that what you're saying?
I don't know if they're shared or not.
No,
No,
no.
they're single, but it's just if someone's parked behind someone,
just
you
not
don't have the
wide.
option of parking here and letting these person out all the time. You'd have to park and block somebody in.
Yeah.
Well, it's just an inconvenience because they have to pull out in order for that person to get out. There is room for them to park, it's just not convenient.
But still, the safety of the pedestrians should be foremost.
Right.
That's our goal, is trying to make it as safe as possible, not be convenient to all the homeowners.
Yeah.
Time-wise, you're talking probably like 7 to 4. So you're really not getting into the 5 o'clock hour, 6 o'clock hour. When somebody coming home. So,
Yeah.
What is the safety issue on parking on the inner side of that?
it's just, if you've got a car there, when school lets out, you got so much traffic coming both directions because they're going into school and coming out of the school. If you've got a car there, people have to leapfrog around that car and try to get through, make their way through best they can. Buses don't go that way, so we don't have that fun. The smaller buses do, like the daycare buses.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The daycare vans.
They park buses overnight there, in the morning, so they come out of there.
They do come out of there in early morning, yes.
All right, and you said they do have parking garage, they do have garages.
Yeah, they have
themselves.
garages,
All right.
not necessarily always a driveway though.
Okay. Any questions for, is it Sergeant Buchanan now?
Yes.
Okay, any questions for Sergeant Buchanan? Okay.
I would say, looking at the curve, I know that people want to park by their house. If we make it inside parking only, we're gonna push more people over there. There may only be 4 spots, but people are gonna find a place to park. You've got another road coming out there. The driveways for those homes are actually a little bit longer, so you would be able to park in your driveway there. But if it's just 4 parking spots that we're debating on, I mean, it's dangerous. It is. We haven't had a head-on collision there, but as much traffic flows through there, I mean, it's definitely
I
possible.
mean, I don't want that on my conscience. I don't know about anybody
Whether or
else.
not you move the parking to the inside or the outside, you're still making someone traveling in a different direction go left of center, whether it's this travel lane or this travel lane, someone's got to go left of center. And naturally, well, if you moved it out like outside like she's talking about, you do have a better line of sight because you can see further on the line of sight. But it's still a safety concern, because someone's going to have to go left of center. And we have that happen head on, then we're there, so.
What's the cost of all this signage, David?
The signage, again, we're using DOT standard issue, the speed limit signs, as Sergeant Buchanan said, they have to be what we call reflectivity. You see them at night, they got the little lines in it, reflects back to them. And then we have to sign off on the back of it. So they have to be, to answer your question, they run probably around $40, $45. If we use a U-channel pole, that's another $20. So a standard sign's probably going to be somewhere around $75.
The speed limit signs, and looking at the state statute, I think we can do the entry points for speed limit signs. There's another sign that goes with it throughout the development. And those would be posted on Eagle Road. It just has to touch the affected roadways for it to be enforceable. So if that's at the entry/exit points, then any roadway in that development will fall under that signage.
So we would do signage at Lexington, Boundary.
You guys aren't gonna want DOT signs all through.
One at
No.
Blueberry, one is
That's
essentially.
what I'm telling. I mean, it's gonna not look good. so-
Yeah.
The no parking signs aren't like that. They've got to have some visible.
Yeah.
You can supplement with the.
That's what we're saying, so the no parking on the streets, on this side of the street, we just do enough that it's enforceable by the law, and then we supplement with our
And
own.
you'll do the same as speed limits.
Speed limits, if we do them at just the entry points, there's 3 entry points, then we'll be covered throughout the neighborhood.
Everybody would see it going in.
Got it.
And the reason the speed limit signs weren't put there in the beginning was, we go back way years ago when Chris Boone was in charge of it. And there was a question
I've heard that
about,
name a long
is
time.
it 25 or is it 20? We told him we have an ordinance that's 25. And he said, well, we're building, let's get the homes built, we'll decide what we want it to read. They wanted to come back to the city and request a 20, and they never came back to the city. So therefore, none of the speed limit signs got put up.
Isn't he working on that project behind Harris Teeter too?
Yes.
Make sure he does the speed limit sign.
We learn each time.
I know.
We will.
Parking
It's hard
lots,
for me
speed
because it
limit
goes
signs.
back way, like when I was in
Yeah.
middle school, but I'm trying to remember.
So that's the reason that
Driveways, streets, meeting up, all of that.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions? You want to hear from staff recommendation? Adrian?
I'll certainly defer to the police department on the safety aspect of it, but just as a point of clarification, if you haven't seen the school pick up and drop off in the morning and afternoon, Doug Husseller is our school resource officer for Belmont Central, and he's done a really good job managing the traffic in the mornings. And so he put some orange cones at the intersection of Assembly and Eagle, and he's out there directing traffic. So traffic basically goes in and it follows those purple circles. It goes to the far entrance, queues through the school, goes out the outer drive and makes a left, back down those purple circles, back down to Eagle. Prior to Doug really organizing this, cars would kind of come in that way, but they would either go out through the neighborhood or back down Assembly Street. So you've got two-way school traffic on Assembly for 20 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the afternoon. Other than that, it's fine. But if you have cars parked on Assembly Street during those times, when we need it to be two-way, functioning two-way, it just messes things up. So that's why we definitely don't want to have parking during school hours on Assembly Street.
Oh, sorry, Amy. Could we do it even more narrow, where it's just for pickup and drop-off times then? Like, and so if somebody, you know, has a play date, somebody could come and park in front of their home and do it that way, like a more narrow
Like a
time?
7 to 9, like 3 to 5 thing?
Have a very
Yeah.
specific time frame.
I mean,
That's the
we have
intent.
very, very limited special activities where it can be different times, but for the biggest majority of them, that would work perfect, like 7 to 9.
Monday through Friday,
Yeah.
7 to 9, and then.
And then cover your weekends.
Yeah.
See, the
Yeah.
public process works again.
Yeah.
It would match the school zone sign out on Eagle Road at the times, I would
Right.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the lower speed limit. And then the other issue is the speed limit itself. I mean, it's, by ordinance, it's 25 miles an hour. And I want to, sort of, Ken, if you want to speak to the last page in your packet is the results of the traffic study that was done end of May, 1st of June. It does list the speed limit as 35 miles an hour, where it's actually 25. But you see that 85% of vehicles were clocked at 20 miles an hour or under. So, and this is something that I talk to my neighbors about all the time. When and all these houses have very small front yards, and most of the time we're out in the front yard or the sidewalk. And
Feels fast.
when a car is driving by you at 20 miles an hour, or even at 15 miles an hour, and you're standing 10 feet from that car, it feels fast. And so you sort of freak out and you grab your kid and grab your dog, you know, and you kind of say something nasty to the driver, but the driver's not speeding. It's your perception because of how close you are to them. So there's, based on the data, there's not a speeding problem in the neighborhood. But if you're out there walking your dog, or, you know, pushing a stroller, or just out in the front yard, it certainly feels faster. But, I mean, I think the data supports, you know, a 20 or 25 mile an hour. So our default setting is 25 miles an hour. There's a movement in places around the country there's a campaign called 20 is Plenty, and it's basically for residential streets. 20 miles an hour is as fast as you would need to go. But I wouldn't certainly defer to you on
Yeah,
that.
and you can see that the majority of vehicles were traveling 20 anyways, or under. So we have very few, and even the 15% that were over 20, I mean, you're talking like 22, 23, 24. We had one vehicle traveling faster than that, but still, most cars are at about the 20 mark or a little less, and it's just because of how tight the streets are. With people out walking, with cars parked, you just can't really go that fast through there. It's just too dangerous.
Trash vehicles are probably the ones that push the envelope.
Could be.
That's the way it seems.
Yeah.
They really buzz through the neighborhood. Of course, they're trying to get as much done in as little time as possible. I have noticed that they tend to push the envelope on the speed.
Well, thank you, Sergeant.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? So, do we have to make a motion to lower the speed limit?
So, yeah, so by default, the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. So the staff would recommend that you reduce that to 20 miles an hour, and then adopt the no parking on the side of the street as presented in the proposal. Then also have the no parking, we said during school hours, but certainly can change it to those specific times, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., and then, 2 to 3:30 or 2 to 4, I think whatever it says on the speed limit sign on Eagle Road makes sense.
But now, whatever proposal we make, we're recommending.
And then you
to the
recommend this to
council.
the full council, which we could take to the council in January.
Yeah.
And then how are the residents notified of the changes?
We would notify the HOA board and then ask them to,
We have a property management company that would email all the residents, and because of the nature of this, because there will be law enforcement, we will do a mailing to each individual residence.
You'll do that prior to our next council meeting?
No, not until it's
Not
approved.
until it's actually agreed to.
are you asking them if they would notify the neighborhood that
Before.
city council is considering this?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'll send out an email, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of our changes, they seem real popular, end up not being very
This one-
popular.
No, I-
This one won't be,
No, nothing,
it'll be what?
I understand.
So I just want to be, I don't need to be popular, I just want to be transparent.
No,
So-
no,
People love change.
Yeah, people love change, especially parking in front of their homes. Chris Christie was the last guy, he sold his house, moved.
No, I'll make sure that all the residents are aware of the city council meeting and what we will be discussing there.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept the staff's recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second? Do you have more questions, Martha?
No, I'm nervous. I just want to make sure we've got all the pieces all delineated here, so,
I feel like Adrian has it.
okay. I'm fine with it then.
All right. So what is that? First, a second, we got to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. I would move that we also add that to the consent agenda in January, since we have the majority of voters here.
So you don't feel that we need a long presentation?
I don't feel that we need a long presentation. I don't, is your name Heather? Or Danielle? Danielle. I don't think Danielle needs to
The
attend
only
either.
thing with that, Ryan, is that public comment is afterwards, so if anybody disapproved of it, you'd hear about it after you approved it, just throwing it out.
And this is not anything that would require a public hearing, obviously. If somebody felt passionate and wanted to come out, they could speak a public comment, were this on the regular agenda. If we put it at consent agenda, the council presumably would approve it since the three of you seem to be in favor of it.
What do you think we should do?
So I'm fine with keeping it on the consent agenda, as long as the neighborhood will let the neighbors know, the residents know that this is going
We
on.
can always pull it off the consent
Yeah.
agenda at the last minute and move it on the regular agenda.
If we get feedback that this is a terrible, awful idea between now and
I
then,
just don't know if we need to shake it out for 45 minutes in January.
No,
you'll have other things that you'll need to discuss.
All right.
it's a consent agenda unless we have some kind of problem, right?
Yeah, you can always pull it off the consent agenda if needed.
Very good. All right.
That's all that we have.
Okay.
Clarification on the curb. What was the clarification on the curb?
The curb is going to be no parking except for like 7 to 9 and 3 to 5, Monday through Friday.
That's on assembly.
No, we were
That's on
talking about the
assembly.
red area.
Oh,
The boxes, the circles that are red in the curb.
Yeah, that's no parking. That was the staff recommendation.
no parking.
Both sides.
Hey, I do have one thing, another business, if I may, real quickly, and we can hold another meeting after the January council. It's the same issue that you have now. We have the same issue with, over here on Davis Street in Kenwood, where we have vehicles that's packed because of the restaurants now. You can't get through there, it's cars on both sides, vehicles on both sides, and then at the curb, Kenwood and Davis, they're parking right up to the curb. You can't see to pull out. So Sergeant Buchanan brought that to my attention. I think probably what we need to do is hold another public safety meeting, maybe in January.
Well, if it's an issue of parking within 25 feet of the curb, we can go ahead and sign that now.
Yeah.
under
Yeah,
existing
I mean,
ordinance.
that's the issue right now. On Kenwood, it's between Kenwood and Davis, that's the problem, they're parking right up against the curb. The problem on Davis is there's not any signage that says where you can park this side of the street or not.
Is it better to put a sign there or to stripe it?
And the signs all we really need, no parking this side. The problem we have on Davis, because we're gonna have another meeting, because there's some businesses involved. So we can't just go out there and pick a side and say this is the side you can park on. So I think, based on Sergeant Buchanan's effort, we probably really need to hold another public public safety meeting to address that after we've had time to talk to the businesses.
Right.
Is that okay?
People are now parking right in front of Old Stone at that, this is not a spot there, but they created.
Yeah, it's a
So I don't
problem.
know how you want to fix it, but
Well, it's an easy fix as far as no parking on the curb, there's no parking, it's 25 feet in. So you put a sign 25 feet out, it's posted on both sides, and they can't park there, and these guys can enforce it. Parking on one side of the streets, the particular side of the street's the issue we have to address with the people that live there and also the businesses. So we can't just go stick up a sign that says you can't park on this side of the street. We haven't chosen this, we don't want to choose the side of the street, we want them to. So, yeah, but it is.
and that's on what street?
Davis. Now,
The new restaurant that opened up.
Yeah.
More popular than the ice cream bar used to be.
yeah, so,
The good news is we have a vibrant downtown.
That is good news. I wonder if we should wait and let that shake out a little bit down there Because you had the lodge open and then this bottle, I mean,
Yeah.
we can't possibly have enough evidence.
We can go ahead and put the
what's going on.
signs.
Sure.
Yeah, I think do that, yeah, do that.
In the corner.
Yeah, so
That's a
that'll,
city issue, and that's a safety issue, and I've got 3 of those in stock.
okay.
And wherever we have, to answer your question, if you try to stripe it, striping works until someone walks over it.
Yeah.
And then they don't mess up the.
I was thinking the striping in front of Old Stone, so we don't have to put another sign there, but.
But we can post those signs and get those out of the way, if that'll help you.
And then we can figure out if we want to go to one side.
Yes.
I hate to lose the side of parking there if it's not a
Yeah.
real safety issue.
So Davis is basically 3 lanes.
Okay.
And you've got people taking up 2 of them parking, so you've only got that center. And depending on the day, depending on the time, it's from Kenwood out to Woodrow. So you've got a car that comes out or is trying to come out, and another one has turned on the street, say from Kenwood, they're facing each other, so
Yeah.
somebody's got to back out.
It's stuck in there the other day.
Yeah, it really is kind of a mess.
Which side's better? Yeah.
There's a lot-
The one side, you have the face of the businesses, the other side, it's the back of all the businesses.
Yeah, you've got a lot of driveways and parking lots that dump out from the Main Street side of Davis. And then you've got some homes and businesses. on
Think about it and let us know what to do.
But we'll go ahead and put the signs on.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Got it done for Rachel.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I know. Bye, guys.
Anything else?
That's all we have.
All right, I got my Christmas party.
All right, you want to adjourn us?
Make a motion to adjourn?
I second.
Yeah, we don't have the time. I feel like I should.
Guess I made my own motion.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Oh, we're not getting to go to your party?
Here's a fun fact, you actually don't have to.
Motion to adjourn? Yeah, I do. There's a lot of things I make motions for during council meetings. Just so that the mayor isn't caught off guard. Just keep the things flowing. You ever notice that?
Oh, get beat inside, get some movement, I'm never gonna get you.
Well, the, Jamie, thing for this too, Jamie, a lot of the people are not seconding motions anymore.
Well, yeah, no, you don't legally have to require a second.
So we talked about that for the actual.
Yeah, it's just a practice of,
We'll find out.
yeah, it's just a board practice of whether you want to or not.
So tell you again, I can say bring you a thing about college, and then in person, the outside.
Could you do that on consent agenda, you put on there 29?
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, that works.
I know what I meant to tell you. When we have the person in our team meeting and stuff, you realize that if I were in a normal workplace, I would be in a hostile work environment. Because we had somebody who's trying to get you fired, which I did. You have somebody else about you, which you did. So I'm in a hostile work environment. So just remind people back, if you're looking at it, that would be part of it. Because what he did the other time, was like a couple years ago now, when he said that I didn't have my papers filed in Raleigh, so I couldn't vote at the end of the year, and I did. I'm good.
Can you explain to me, because we're gonna be coming up against this really soon here. So there's a decorative one that you could do for no parking ticket? Hash it out.
Yeah, we know what we're gonna do, I mean, I can go ahead and start, I can work